welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 163 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 19 of A Storm of Swords, that's Tyrion 3.
And as we always try to do, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide you some additional information about the characters and other things of note in this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine this morning. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I'm still in a sort of spiraling financial meltdown. It's like, I can't catch a break.
We've been feeling that same way basically since the start of summer. We're just like, where is the money going?
I've told you before that I couldn't get through it quicker if I had a bonfire of cash, which I was constantly feeding.
Sometimes it feels like that's what it is, a bonfire of cash. Like, just keep shoveling it in. Well, I will say, you see in the notes here, it says GOHFC.
Oh, yes, I did see that. I have no idea what this means, but I'm excited.
So Ethan was here this past week, and when he's here, he usually hangs out with us at night, so Stacey and I don't watch our usual lineup of shows that we watch. Like, I didn't get to watch House of the Dragon episode until Thursday instead of Sunday. So Ethan and I took to watching this Welcome to Wrexham show about Ryan Reynolds and Rob Mackelly, I think his name is, buying the Welsh soccer team.
I'm acutely aware, Mackelly.
Yes, okay. Well, for anyone else out there who's not aware, they buy a Welsh soccer team that's been kind of down on its luck. It's below Oldham, correct? I mean, Oldham's in Division 2, and Wrexham is the division below that, right?
Mackelly...
This is a sort of subject.
This might be it. This might be it for this podcast. Oldham last season fell into the division with Wrexham.
Oh, that's okay.
They are currently our bitter rivals. So do not take their side, let me tell you.
Would never do such a thing.
With their Deadpool money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so yeah, that's the thing. So they buy this club, and Rob McElhenney in the first episode says, I knew, I have TV star money. I knew I was going to need movie star money. I knew I was going to need superhero movie star money. And so he taps Ryan Reynolds, and they'd actually never met in person before they buy this club together. But
that was very strange. I read that.
Yeah, I found it odd too. But basically, they're just doing this documentary, like the whole thing, from the idea to buy it all the way through the purchase process, and it's all documented. But my issue, it's a fun show, I'm enjoying it. But my issue with it is that they're actors doing a documentary. So the whole time they're doing the documentary, in my mind, I think they're just acting. Like I envision Ryan Reynolds being handed a sheet of information about this club he bought 10 minutes before the Zoom calls that they have, reading up on it, and then being like, "What? Oh goodness, wow!" So, but anyway, why it says GOHFC is because I thought we should take our podcast riches and buy a club, possibly Oldham. We could dump, all this GOH wealth into Oldham and become rivals. See which.
Now, I will say that I actually think that Ryan Reynolds is a bit of a hard-nosed businessman.
Yes,
he knows what he's doing.
Certainly seems to be.
Right?
Yes.
If you were to take a club like Wrexham and build them back up, I mean, for example, if you move into the Premier League, which from where Wrexham are, takes a minimum of 4 seasons. They would have to move up to the second division, the first division, the Championship, and then the Premier League. But when you move into the Premier League, you get written a cheque for conservatively $350 million.
Woo! That'll
that
work.
Day. They just hand it over to you, yeah?
Right.
And optimistically, way over $500 million. Way over $500 million. So this is chump change compared to what the riches you can make from owning a soccer club.
Yes.
However, the bonfire of cash would be a much bigger bonfire of cash in the meantime. So you do need movie star reserves to get to that point.
Sure.
But if you get there, oh my goodness, you can become super wealthy after this.
Yes, I can imagine. But, Ethan kept making the argument. He's like, but this is not fair. Like, they got that player, like the best player in the champion division or Division 1 or something, that should have gone to the champion division. Instead, he came all the way down to, I shouldn't say all, okay. He took a couple steps back.
You are on thin ice.
I can see it in your face. He took a couple steps back to play for Wrexham when no other team in that division would be able to get such a quality player.
Right.
And they,
I mean, it's also that division. That division is kind of like a microcosm of the division below the Premier League, because it's the division that everybody wants to get out of.
Right.
So it's hard scrabble, and people, on a much smaller scale, people really invest. I mean, if you're a billionaire, any team in the division below the Premier League is a great investment.
Oh, sure.
Because you've got a 3 in 22 chance of moving up to the Premier League and getting that $500 million check.
Sure. Yeah.
In 1 year.
Buy low. Yep.
Right. You can sell them after that. Take the check with you.
So, anyway.
But it's the fifth tier, which is where Wrexham and Oldham are, is a sort of microcosm of that, because it's the first league that's not fully professional. Above that is fully professional. And so there's television money and stuff like that in the division above. And, definitely not riches, but a lot more than in the fifth tier.
Sure. Right.
My sister is still going to almost every Oldham game. I mean, and we were Premier League. Just remind you of this. We were Premier League.
Right.
And now we're in this fifth tier of semi-professionals. And we've become such a mar and par operation. I mean, she knows, she's on first name terms with every single person involved in the club.
Oh, wow.
Because wherever she stands, she's within talking distance of them.
Or yelling distance of the players.
In Lucy's case.
So, anyway, I think that's what we should do with all of our riches we've generated.
We will have to buy a smaller club than that, let me tell you. Because that's the thing. How do you pay anyone? Because, I mean, where do you get money from? Because
we're trying to figure that out just between ourselves. How do we pay ourselves? We might have to start with like an 8U soccer team.
Right. I mean, because you're going to get no gate receipts and you're going to get no sponsorships. You have no income, essentially.
Right.
Oldham and Wrexham, they have a little bit of that, but not enough to pay real wages to their players.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's just a cash. It is a cash cow in the wrong direction.
So it is a huge advantage for Wrexham to have, let's say, Ryan Reynolds' money.
Right.
I mean, because the other clubs are just scratching by.
Right, exactly. And with Ryan Reynolds' money, they can afford to operate at a loss.
Right. Yeah.
Now, there are some financial fair play rules in place to stop people from operating at a significant loss.
Oh, okay.
For exactly that reason.
Yeah. Major League Baseball should adopt that, but that's for another day.
The thing is that they're not that strong and they're not that well policed. So I'm sure if he wanted to lose $4 million a year, he could, and he would have a very good team down there. But even that, it's just no guarantee. I mean, it's just no guarantee.
Yeah. Well, we didn't watch that many episodes, but things aren't exactly going swimmingly thus far.
Yeah.
So.
I did see when Wrexham came to Oldham for the game, I did see that the fans were fighting in the streets outside, which was rather exciting. Back to the old days.
Yes. Okay.
I really wished. I saw a video of it, and it looked, like typical football hooliganism. I really wished both sides were wearing Deadpool masks. It made it much funnier.
Yes, it would have. Well, before we started recording, we were like, okay, we've got a huge show, so let's not dilly-dally before we start.
Well, then you started talking about football.
I know.
What do you expect me to do?
Anyway.
Let's get down to business then.
Yes.
How did we leave Tyrion Lannister? Last we saw of Tyrion, he was paying a visit to Lord Varys in Varys' own sparse chambers. He learned that Grand Maester Pycelle was being reinstated to the small council, and Sir Boros Blunt was being reinstated to the Kingsguard. both loyalists, especially now, to his father Tywin. However, he failed to learn any new information about the motives behind Sir Mandon Moore's attempt on Tyrion's life. He scheduled a rendezvous with Shae with plans to break off their relationship for her own good.
Right.
Shae not only persuaded him otherwise, but to also promise to protect her. Finally, Tyrion sent Bronn to find the singer Simon Silvertongue, who knows much more about his relationship with Shae than Tyrion would like. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
Okay. Tyrion sits at the small council table with the other council members. There are many new faces around the table. Aside from his father and his uncle Kevan, they're joined by the Reach Lords Mace Tyrell, Paxter Redwyne, and Mathis Rowan. Tyrion realizes that with all the new faces since he last sat at this table, the rules of the game have changed. However, he's not sure what the new rules are.
Tywin wants to kick things off by getting a war update. Varys is happy to oblige. He's got good news. Randyll Tarly met the Northern Force led by Robert Glover and Helman Tallhart outside of Duskendale and sent the Northern Force into a retreat to Harrenhal. In their path, the Northmen will soon find Sir Gregor Clegane and his men. Helman Tallhart is reported dead along with 1,000 Northmen.
Tywin adds that his brother-in-law/cousin, Sir Davin, is reforming what's left of Davin's late father Stafford's army. When Robb Stark goes north to reclaim Winterfell, the force will descend upon Riverrun. Meanwhile, Balon Greyjoy, the newly self-appointed king of the Isles in the north, has proposed alliance terms. The terms are simple. Recognize him as the king of all north of the Neck. A proposal Mace Tyrell and Paxter Redwyne are all too happy to accept. What use is the north anyway?
Next on the agenda, the issue of Lysa Arryn and the Knights of the Vale sitting idle thus far. Tyrion wants to take a force into the Vale and crush her, but Tywin has other plans for him. Instead, Petyr Littlefinger Baelish will travel to the Eyrie, woo and marry Lysa, then bring the Vale into the King's Peace. His elevation to Lord of Harrenhal greatly aids his chances of being found as an acceptable match for a woman of Lysa's station, a detail Tyrion realises that Littlefinger knew all along.
As for Tywin's other plans for Tyrion, he'll take Littlefinger's place as Master of Coin. The idea makes Tyrion wary. Paxter Redwyne wants to get back to the Greyjoy alliance offer, seeing merit in adding the Ironborn log ships to his fleet and using the combined force to crush Stannis on Dragonstone. Tywin points out the Ironborn are already doing what they want them to do, fighting the Starks, so why buy the cow when the milk is free? They'll wait to see if a better offer comes along.
Tyrion is reminded of the important letters his father was writing when he visited him in the Tower of the Hand. He wonders if these might be associated with this better offer. His thoughts are disrupted when Grand Maester Pycelle announces that 300 Dornishmen are riding for King's Landing, much to the dismay of Mace Tyrell. Tywin shuts Tyrell down and steers the conversation towards sweeter pastures, dividing up the spoils of war.
In all, 47 lesser lordlings and 619 knights died for Stannis in the Battle of the Blackwater. As traitors, their heirs will be disinherited, and their lands and castles given to more loyal subjects. Mace Tyrell proves to have an appetite for the fruits of victory that suit his portly stature. His top prize is Brightwater Keep, seat of House Florent. Its lands and incomes will now belong to his second son, Sir Garland.
A few minor details put a wrap on the meeting. Sir Adam Marbrand has found some crystals from the previous High Septon's crown. Tywin wants a new one commissioned for the new High Septon in time for the royal wedding. An actual kraken was spotted off the coast of the Fingers. A war between Tyrosh and Lys seems imminent, and a 3-headed dragon has hatched in Karth. None of that interests Tywin. What news of his missing nephew Tyrek?
No news of Tyrek. However, some Goldcloaks who fled during the battle have returned. Tyrion and Varys argue that they be sent to the Night's Watch, as ravens with dire tidings have arrived from Castle Black. Tywin's not interested. Let Robb Stark and Balon Greyjoy sort that out. They want to be kings. The men's knees will be broken with hammers as a lesson. With that, Tywin closes the meeting for all but his family.
When alone, Tyrion questions his promotion to Master of Coin, a notion put forth by Littlefinger himself. That's Tyrion's concern. He doesn't trust Littlefinger, neither should his father. Kevan points out that Littlefinger has been loyal. In fact, just yesterday he brought word of a Tyrell plan to spirit Sansa Stark away to Highgarden to marry Willas Tyrell. This news shocks Cersei and Tyrion alike. Sansa is Cersei's hostage. She goes nowhere without her leave, but it's a leave that she must grant if asked, or chance offending the Tyrells. So they must forestall Mace from making the request. But how?
By a marriage. Cersei's marriage. What the? Over her dead body? She's young, fertile, and a marriage will put an end to the incest claims from the Stannis camp. Despite Cersei's best protests, Tywin will win this battle, Tyrion is sure. The suitors? The list ranges from Balon or Theon Greyjoy to Oberyn Martell to one of the Redwyne twins, but it's Willas Tyrell that Tywin prefers.
Cersei's heard enough. She storms out with her father's leave, of course. His father's eyes now turn to Tyrion. Astute as always, Tyrion guesses what Tywin has planned. You plan to marry me to Sansa Stark. Yes, and quickly. Sansa is married before Mace can request her hand for Willas. He cannot be offended. Tyrion is as disturbed as he is intrigued by the prospect of marrying young Sansa. She's a child, but Tyrion Lannister, Lord Protector of Winterfell, has a ring to it. Reluctantly, Tyrion agrees.
But there's one issue. Robb Stark will have kids with his Frey wife, and they will be his heirs. Tyrion and Sansa's children will inherit nothing. Not so. Tywin reveals that Robb has married Jane Westerling. Tyrion is stunned, both for Robb's unfathomable decision and the Westerlings. They stand to lose everything. The crag is close enough to Castamere to know what happens to those who cross Tywin, though Tywin seems hardly bothered. Tywin assures Tyrion that the Westerlings are well aware of what happened at Castamere. He leaves Tyrion with a parting line. The greatest fools are oftentimes more clever than the men who laugh at them. Whew, that is a chapter right there.
Yeah. It's always the way, but I just love what goes on in King's Landing. It's just
Yes.
Things tick along, and it's the fulcrum of everything. So you actually check in on all the other storylines, basically.
Right.
I mean, even Dany's storyline gets a mention here.
Yeah, it's basically the heartbeat of the show. Of the story, Yeah.
Yep.
And this one, my audiobook had it at 51 minutes.
Wow.
And just about every sentence of it was packed with information that either we were finding out or that we knew and that other characters were finding out and reacting to it.
Yeah.
So it was really tough to do a show
when we get to
on.
the TV show, actually, you'll see that in the TV show we get a lot less than this, but we actually get more as well. There are things that are discussed at this council meeting that haven't reached the book characters' ears. For example, they know that Jaime has escaped.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting what the differences are.
Yeah. Well, we could seriously have done a 3-episode series on this chapter alone. We're going to cram it in.
That's right. So the wholesale seat changes around the small council table paint a fascinating picture of the new world order that's imposed since Tywin's come to town. So Tywin's sitting in the king's seat, and then Cersei and Kevan are at his sides, and Tyrion's at the far end.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. Yeah, I think that the fact that he goes through where people are sitting, Martin does, is intentional to capture this new reality with Kevan and Cersei, Tywin's right and left hand people, there on one side of the table, on each side of him, flanking him, and then Tyrion, the outcast, is at the complete opposite end of the table by himself. And then we've got all these Reach Lords kind of just, they're a group, they're kind of aligned to each other. And then we've got Littlefinger and Varys. They're kind of wild cards. They're each kind of doing their own thing. And you just get this sense that Tyrion is on an island way down there at the end of the table. Oh, and you've got Grand Maester Pycelle, who's as far away as possible from Tyrion, up next to Cersei.
Which would be sitting on Tywin's lap, I would assume.
Yeah, it's pretty much. He's next to Cersei, his benefactor and protector. So I thought it was pretty neat how he set the chess pieces around the board there.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting that he mentions that he thinks that Kevan. He says Kevan is Tywin's van in council meetings. He never has a thought that Tywin hasn't had first, which I think is interesting because I'm not sure exactly how Kevan was portrayed in the TV show, but I always thought of him as being just slightly buffoonish and sort of like Tywin didn't really trust him. But here it feels like he is a trusted mouthpiece, at least, if not, doesn't have his own ideas, but he is the mouthpiece, which means that Tywin must be confiding quite deeply in him in order to be a mouthpiece.
Yes, it feels like if Tywin is the CEO of Lannister Enterprises, that Kevan is his COO, maybe, his chief operating officer.
Yeah.
Because, on one hand, it's a little bit of a dig at Kevan that he's never had a thought that Tywin hadn't had first. Like
right.
He's not intelligent enough to come up with his own ideas.
Right.
But it feels like Tywin seems to fully trust him, at least.
Right, exactly. Tywin's telling him things he's not telling to Cersei and Tyrion.
Right. Yeah. But it's definitely a much fuller table than the skeleton crew when Tyrion was Hand of the King.
Yeah, but isn't this some of this just because of the aftermath of the battle? I mean,
yes.
I don't think that the Redwynes and the Rowans will be at that table going forward. Although, have they been invited to the small council, or is it just because they're in town?
Oh, I think they've been invited.
But to be members of the small council?
That's a good question, because there were no titles designated.
That's what I thought.
Like, you'd figure that maybe Pax of Redwyne would be Master of Ships now.
Yes,
but there was no mention of any of these titles, so it could be just because they're in town and because they're important lords that the Lannisters are still in the process of building an alliance with.
Yeah, so Tyrion's concerned that the rules have changed and he doesn't know the new rules. But honestly, it doesn't seem that complicated to me. I mean, Mace Tyrell is a sort of like a fulcrum of power on this table, and Cersei is going to be herself, but at the same time, Tywin's lapdog. Right. And Grand Maester Pycelle is just going to be a further version of that. And Kevin's going to be the mouthpiece. There just doesn't seem that much to learn. I mean, it's, he's got to tread carefully because he doesn't know who he can trust and who he can't. Like, for instance, he has kind of trusted Varys in the past, but now can he trust Varys anymore? Where's Varys' allegiance?
Right.
And he never trusted Littlefinger, so that's probably smart not to change that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, before the Battle of Blackwater, it was basically just Cersei and him duking it out.
Right.
And, with all these new faces and with Tywin present, clearly Tyrion's power has greatly diminished. And he's also, in the larger scheme of politics around King's Landing, basically all of his allies are gone. Jacelyn Bywater's dead. His clansmen are no longer in the city. And now, unfortunately for Tyrion, his arch nemesis, his sister Cersei, is more closely aligned with the new leader than he is. So it's going to be problematic. But yeah, like you said, I mean, the rules, they haven't changed that much. He knows who everybody at the table is, know. So
Varys explains that the Stark force that was headed to Duskendale has been defeated by Randyll Tarly, and their retreat takes them back towards Harrenhal, but Gregor Clegane is waiting for them on the road, so they're in big trouble. Helman Tolhart is dead with 1,000 others, and Robert Glover leads the retreat into the trap. So Tywin told Tyrion of this plan when Tyrion visited in the Tower of the Hand, sending Randyll Tarly up the Rosby Road to meet them at Duskendale. Tyrion thought it was pointless for the Starks to attack Duskendale, not worth the effort, and thought that this might be Robb's first blunder. But again, we're not sure if this command came from Robb or from Roose Bolton.
Right, because we were there in Arya's POV in Roose Bolton's chambers when he gave the command, and he said it was the King's command. But we did not see any evidence that it was the King's command. And his reasoning to send this fairly large force to Duskendale was because it was rich farmland that had hardly been touched by war. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. The whole thing never made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I got nothing really. I mean, there's no... I mean, Roose is a bit of an agent of chaos, so maybe what he said was true. I see some place that has not been affected by the war. Let me bring war to it.
Right, especially as winter is coming.
Right.
Let's burn more.
Let's destroy some more crops.
Yes, exactly.
But what is interesting how quickly the Lannisters knew of this plan, and so were able to sort of set the trap for it. So it feels something's leaking out of Harrenhal.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. We get an update on Lancel. Lancel Lannister is Kevan's son. Apparently he has some good days and some bad days. You know, he was injured in the Battle of the Blackwater. Cersei comes often to pray for him, and Tyrion, of course, wonders whether she's praying for him to live or die. It's both work, especially the dying. Remember, the reason he was injured in the battle was because he part of his deal with Tyrion for spying on Cersei was that he would get command in the battle. Well, be careful what you wish for, Lancel.
Right.
And when Cersei wanted to bring Joffrey into Maegor's Keep during the battle, Lancel begged her to reconsider. Yeah, it was the moment where Lancel actually sort of did something sort of noble and off his own back. He actually said, "Don't do that. We need the king out here with us."
Yeah. Now Tyrion thinks, like you said, he's wondering whether Cersei is praying for Lancel to live or die, because he thinks that now that Tywin is in town, it's a bit dangerous for Cersei to have Lancel, a smoking gun to further incest. Although at least this is cousin to cousin. Tywin married his first cousin, so
right, and Cersei is not married at the moment, so
right.
The crime is not so great, but it's certainly, if news of that got out, it would certainly fan the flames of the incest claim.
True.
For sure.
Yes.
But then again, I mean, what's in it for Lancel to reveal this? He's as culpable as she is, and he gains nothing from it other than notoriety.
Yeah.
And he gains a lot of enemies.
Right. It doesn't... There'd have to be a really good reason to bring it up.
Yeah. So Robb Stark went into the Westerlands and destroyed Stafford Lannister's army. Stafford's son, Devan, is reforming the remnants of that army that was defeated at Ark's Cross. And this is because, Robb was stretched thin, and he's basically retreated back from the west, back to Riverrun. And so the west is once again in the hands of the Lannisters, and so free to rebuild their armies. Of course, if you've killed their people, that is a big component of the armies.
Right, yes. If the original force was routed by... Now, they were routed by a surprise attack by Robb, but, if they've already been routed, a lot of their people were killed, how high quality can this third iteration of the Lannister force be? Because the original Lannister force is with Tywin, what's left of that original one. And the second force was the one that Stafford Lannister was building. That one was destroyed. And now Devan is putting together a third copy of it. So you have to imagine the quality continues to degrade here.
Right. But the plan for it is not entirely daft, because they expect that Robb, because of the news of what's going on in the north, Robb is going to have to go north, leaving Riverrun back undefended again, and this Devan Lannister's army can descend on Riverrun and besiege it once more, and Riverrun again becomes, a hot zone.
Yeah, that's true. And according to Brendan Tully, there is a bit of upgrade in the leader, because back when, it was like the first Cat chapter of Clash of Kings or something like that, he told Cat that Stafford Lannister was a bit of a dullard, but his son Devan was more of a threat. And now here Devan is putting this one together. So,
Yeah. So Balon Greyjoy has proposed an alliance. He wants everything north of the neck. And, sort of like there's various opinions on this within the small council. Cersei questions by what right does he claim half the kingdom? And Tywin makes an interesting point. He says it's by conquest, which, of course, in many ways, for the Seven Kingdoms over the last 300 years, has been the defining way one claims something, by conquering it, all the way back to Aegon.
Right.
Aegon had no claim to be the king of the Seven Kingdoms, but he had a dragon and he claimed it, and everyone said, "Oh, okay then."
Okay, so you're the leader, so it's all yours.
So Tywin, gives legitimacy to Balon's claim. It would give him. He already has the stranglehold on the north. He's got Mackelly, Winterfell, and Deepwood Motte. His longships command the Sunset Sea. So, he's in good position. And if the Lannisters wanted to forcibly remove him, it would be a big pain to do that. In the same way, it's going to be a pain for Robb to do it.
Right.
It'll be a pain for the Lannisters to do it.
At least if it were Robb, he is the king of the North, so he should have the remaining. The remaining people there should, flock to his side. But Mace Tyrell and Paxter Redwyne were all for it. Mace said, "Hey, if Balon Greyjoy is willing to trade sword and sails for stone and ice, let's do it." Paxter Redwyne, he thought the idea of combining the Ironborn ships with his fleet would equal enough strength to crush Stannis on Dragonstone, but I thought clearly there's not been much recon on the status of the Dragonstone fleet, because we saw when Davos sailed into the fleet or into the harbor there, it was basically empty aside from the
and I think some of that is just sort of like parochialism. I mean the Tyrells and Redwynes, they're soft southern lords. They have no idea what's the point of having the North in the Seven Kingdoms, and so they don't see any reason to sort of to fight it. So Tywin's attitude is interesting, because he's sort of like ambivalent about this. He's not rejecting it, but he's like, well, let's just see. He's already doing what we want him to do. We don't have to, give him anything to keep him doing what he's doing, because what he's, everything he's doing is working in our favor without us forming an alliance with him. Yes. So let's string him along, which seems like a perfect answer to me. But it really, for some reason, it really triggers something in Tyrion that he thinks that he's got another plan. But actually, I actually think, taking Tywin's words at face value, I actually think it's perfectly reasonable.
Right.
Maybe 6 months from now, we will form an alliance with the Greyjoys.
Yeah, and later on, that's what he says to Cersei when he proposes the idea of Balon. He's like, I'm not sure yet how I feel about the Greyjoy alliance. And maybe the better option that Tyrion latches onto. So before I get there, what Tyrion's thinking about is those letters that when he woke up from his coma and met Bronn, and then Bronn helped him get up to the Tower of the Hand, Tywin was writing letters, and important letters, as he put it, and he said some battles are won with sword and spear and some with ravens, and so that's what he's thinking about, what Tyrion is thinking about when he hears this better option thing. And later on in this chapter, once all the rest of the small council leaves, that's when Tywin drops the bombshell of Cersei's going to remarry, and one of the options is Balon or Theon. So maybe that's the different option, rather than, let's just agree to him being the king of the North and the Isles. We'll offer Cersei in marriage, and he'll bend the knee to us.
Yeah.
And we'll just form an alliance that way.
I also find the Redwyne's attitude interesting, because the Redwynes have the largest fleet in the Seven Kingdoms, right? And the Greyjoys have the second largest.
I think it's close. I think that sometimes you hear that the Iron Fleet is the largest, but I just find that hard to believe due to their lack of resources. Yes, and the lack of people and the lack of finances. Yeah. To me, it always seems like the Redwyne fleet should be larger.
But It's interesting. I would have thought that if you're vying for who's got the biggest fleet, you might actually be quite antagonistic towards the Greyjoys. That you might not want an alliance with them, unless perhaps he's a little bit of a coward and he doesn't want any naval battle with them, and therefore being allied with them helps him.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe, I mean, and sort of extrapolating that, he's talking about, sort of like a naval landing on Dragonstone. Maybe he wants the Ironborn in the vanguard of that to take, to take the losses.
Right. We'll be back here. You guys go in there.
Outside whatever chain they might have.
Yes. They learned from that chain idea. Hey, that's a pretty smart idea.
It is possible that Tywin is anticipating what he thinks the Freys might do and what the Starks fear the Freys might do, which is when the Starks head north and sort of get bogged down in the neck, that the Freys turn on them because they've been so slighted by Robb's marriage. And then the better alliance might be with the Freys rather than the Greyjoys.
Sure, and that was the fear that Robb voiced last Cat chapter is if we don't make peace with the Freys, we might get stuck in that exact spot.
Yeah.
And Tywin's probably smart enough to realize that's a possibility that, and he also might figure, well, the Starks aren't going to have a lot of luck getting past Moat Cailin from the south. So there's no need to rush here. Let's let this play out a little bit and see what happens before jumping into bed with the Greyjoys, which they clearly aren't all that thrilled about doing.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is that I think Tywin, perhaps later in the chapter, makes the comment that Balon is not really a ruler. He likes to pillage and raid.
He thinks more of plunder than conquest.
Plunder over conquest, exactly. And so this might not stick for the long term, and therefore any kind of alliance here is probably a little premature. So I honestly think obviously Tywin's constantly scheming. Those letters could well have been around this issue, but I really do think he's just playing a waiting game here to see how things pan out.
Right. He could have been writing wedding invitations.
Right, exactly, yeah. So they're concerned about Lysa Arryn and the Knights of the Vale. We are less concerned because we know that she's completely cowardly and is not going to leave the Vale.
Yes.
But at the same time, they are a significant force and they need to declare themselves for one side or the other.
Right.
Or they're going to be a constant, a worry for whoever's in charge.
Yeah, it's surely hard for the Lannisters to just ignore them because they are an uncommitted large force, and there's a lot of reasons why the Lannisters would think that the Vale would side with the Starks and the River Lords, as she is the wife of Jon Arryn, who was the foster father to Ned Stark. She's the daughter, and Robert Baratheon. She is the daughter of Hoster Tully, the sister of Cat, the sister of Edmure. So you certainly would not feel comfortable just thinking, they're going to stay, they're going to stay idle. Although it's surprisingly, it was Mace Tyrell who actually had the right of it when he said, "Let her be. She's not like to trouble us," which is actually the case. But they can't just assume that,
Yeah, and what's interesting actually there is that Tyrion is the one who's got the most knowledge of this because he spent time there. He spent time with her. He knows what she's like. It's Tyrion who should have been saying what Mace Tyrell said, but in fact Tyrion is bearing a grudge on this one, and he actually wants command of the forces to go and raid the Vale, which seems like a terrible idea. Not just Tyrion being in command of it, but sending a force at all. I mean, I think one of the lords says. Many an army has
it was Mace
killed itself trying to get up the mountains
on the bloody gate. Yeah, so what Mace says is let's leave the fighting to the fighters, basically, which Tyrion takes offense to. And then he says, you have a greater army, greater leaders than you have had trouble getting through the Mountains of Moon and then smashed themselves to bits on the bloody gate. But what Mace isn't aware of is that Tyrion likely wouldn't face trouble in the Mountains of the Moon. Those are his people. The mountain clansmen.
The Lannisters not exactly paying their debts to those people.
Well, that's a good point. Yes, because Chella tried to come back and they shoot her away. So, but of course the Bloody Gate will be a whole nother matter. There's no, but then, I was thinking back to that chapter where he and the Mountain clansmen decided to have a little bit of an alliance when Tyrion and Bronn were making their way through the Mountains of the Moon. And at the very end of the chapter, like the last line of the chapter is, he tells them he'll give them the Vale of Arryn. So maybe this was always his plan, to return with a Lannister force and then use the Mountain Clan's knowledge of the region to find some way to circumvent the Bloody Gate and then crush Lysa in the Vale. So now he's having that taken away from him, which I'm sure...
Right, because Tywin does take it away from him. He already has a plan to take the Vale, and that's using Littlefinger, because Littlefinger is confident that he can woo and marry Lysa and bring her to the Lannister side of things. Will Lysa have you, is one of the questions that's posed to him, and he said she's had me a few times before, once again bragging about his sleeping with the Tully girls.
His attitude toward it is kind of gross. Yeah. I have the key here between my legs is another comment he makes. And, it's known, we've heard that he brags about taking both the Tully girls' Maidenhead, which is a claim that Cat hotly disputed to Tyrion when he mentioned it. But then, based on Cat's thoughts when she was sitting with her father and he kept saying, the Tansy stuff and the forgiveness and all that kind of thing, she came to this idea that Lysa was possibly pregnant with another man's child when she married Jon Arryn. So it could be true of Lysa. There's evidence to support the possibility that he might have had such relations with Lysa Tully, but Cat outwardly and hotly disputes it. But he also Tywin says that if Littlefinger can bring Lysa and the Vale back into the King's Peace, that Tywin will restore Little Lord Robert as Warden of the East. And that's a throwback to way, way back when when Ned and Robert were actually, I think they were in the Barrowlands, and they were still in the north heading south to King's Landing. And Robert mentioned that he made Jaime Warden of the East because little Robert Arryn was too young and sickly. And of course, Ned very much protested against this idea of making the Lannisters that much more powerful. So, they're offering this as we'll give it back to you if you come into the King's Peace.
Yep. We also now see why Littlefinger wanted the empty honour, as Tyrion put it, of the Lord of Harrenhal, because as Master of Coin, he's got absolutely no way of marrying Lysa Arryn, but as Lord of Harrenhal, well, now Lysa Arryn might marry that, because that's a significant holding, largest castle in the Seven Kingdoms, etc., etc. Still going to be a hard sell, because obviously I think Lysa might do it out of love, because I think Littlefinger is not completely lying about the fact that they've had relations in the past. I think that's true. But the Lords of the Vale, they share her loyalties towards the Tullys, towards the Starks, and knowing that Littlefinger wants the marriage in order to bring her over to the Lannister side might be a tough one to swallow for the Lords of the Vale. So I think it's not going to be an easy thing for Littlefinger to arrange. Yeah,
because he's pretty crafty. So if anyone can do it, he might.
Yes,
might be the
absolutely,
one to pull it off.
But they also might point to the fact that he's never been to Harrenhal, and it's currently occupied by the North. So his claim to be Lord of Harrenhal is a little bit empty.
Right, go set up residence there for a while and then come back.
Yeah. The loss of Littlefinger from the small council leaves a vacancy as Master of Coin, and Tyrion is given that role. Tyrion has a bad feeling about having a Lannister in this role. He doesn't trust... Littlefinger suggested Tyrion for it, and he doesn't trust Littlefinger, so he thinks there must be a trap here.
So yeah, he says, I feel a trap. Littlefinger is subtle and ambitious. I don't trust him, and neither should you, is what he tells his father. And so we've heard a lot about just how heavily the crown is in debt. So possibly the trap is setting Tyrion up to be the scapegoat for why the crown has basically been beggared. There were 6 million golden dragons or something in Denton, 4 of which to his own family.
Yeah.
So some stats like that. So
yeah,
that's the biggest trap I could think of off the top of my head as far as Tyrion taking the role.
It's a good point. So, but Kevan Lannister defends Littlefinger. Just yesterday, he brought he's proving his loyalty. Just yesterday, he brought news of the plan to marry Sansa Stark to Willas Tyrell. So that's where they got this from Littlefinger. So then, I almost want to push this to pedantry because I've got this same comment in pedantry. This does sort of like make the question of the timeline of the dress chapter a little bit interesting because she's being, again, hypothesizing that Sansa was being fit for a wedding dress at behest of the Lannisters. They would need to know this information before they did that.
Yes.
Or not necessarily, but to do it hurriedly, they would need to know that piece of information that they only got yesterday. Right.
So either the chapters aren't completely chronological here. Maybe Martin wanted to leave some suspense as to why the dress was being made.
Right.
And so put this chapter ahead of the revelation that they were going to marry her to
And
Tyrion.
the sequence of events could have been yesterday, news reached Tywin's ears. He immediately sent the dressmaker, and now the small council is hearing about it. So this could be chronological and also not. But there's a slight strangeness to this.
And we mentioned in that chapter that it's possible the dressmaker who mentioned that the Queen Regent herself commissioned this dress and made it sound like she talked to her could have just been trying to puff herself up a little bit. Like, yes, I'm on speaking terms with the Queen Regent. That's how cool I am.
The other thing is, and this is, I think, a reasonable point. The plan to marry Tyrion to Sansa might have been in place anyway. And the only thing that the news of the plan to marry Sansa to Willas has done is speed the timeline.
Sure.
Because now it's like, we got to urgently do this because we don't want her to marry anyone else. But whereas it was just like, hey, that's actually a good idea to marry Tyrion to Sansa. We could have Littlefinger running the Vale, Tyrion running the North, Cersei running Highgarden.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes. Right, yeah. Yeah. One other thing about Littlefinger, this section of the conversation before we move on from it is Littlefinger, Tyrion says Littlefinger is a liar. And Cersei cuts him off and says a thing like, called him black, said the raven to the something or other. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but basically like calling Tyrion a liar as well. But so Cersei cuts him off. He never gets to finish what he's about to say. And I wondered if he was about to tell the dagger story that led to his capture and the start of this war. Basically because Littlefinger lied to Cat about Tyrion owning that dagger as a means of saying, no, we can't trust this guy, and here's why. But then, Cersei made her comment, and Tywin slammed his hand down and said, you two are Lannisters, you will behave like it, and Tyrion possibly never got back to finishing his thought there.
Yeah, we also see how short-sighted and sort of lacking in strategy Cersei can be. She doesn't care if Mace is offended by a rejection of the Sansa Willas plan. Whereas Tywin wants to avoid that by not making by taking away the possibility as quickly as possible. So I think Varys reports. No, it's Grand Maester Pycelle weirdly has this piece of information. The 300 Dornishmen are headed for King's Landing.
It's the only thing he says. The whole chapter. It's the only line he has.
They're going to arrive before the wedding. Mace doesn't like this because it means they're tramping across his land. The years of border skirmishes have left some scars. There was also more recent bad blood. It was Oberyn Martell that crippled Willas Tyrell.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit on that. I don't think we've been told specifically, but it's not really a spoiler. It was it was during a tournament. It was a fair hit. Oberyn hit Willas with the lance. Willas fell off, but his foot got caught on the stirrups of his horse, and the horse fell on him and damaged his leg. Willas doesn't particularly hold any bad blood toward Oberyn, but apparently his father does. So.
Yeah. Tywin slams down on this, doesn't want any infighting between his allies. Prince Doran comes at my son's invitation. He's claiming his seat on the small council, and he wants justice for the murderers of his daughter and grandchildren, which Tyrion at least has the decency to remember is Tywin, or at least Tywin's command. Well, actually, that's not what he thinks. He thinks it's Tywin that offered the bodies as sort of like supplication to the new king, but
wrapped in Lannister
cloaks. But
yes.
But he isn't accusing his father of murder. But we know it was Gregor Clegane, and he's Lannister dog.
And I found the reactions that Tyrion noticed noteworthy. He said that Paxter Redwyne couldn't give a fig about the hypocrisy of this statement that Tywin was making, but that Mathis Rowan was fit to gag.
Right.
And so I just wonder if maybe Mathis Rowan is a little more sensitive, a little more empathetic to things than possibly Paxter Redwyne is. I'm not sure what we were supposed to take away from that exactly, but that seemed to be what I got from it anyway.
So the spoils of war get divided up. The biggest news here is that the Tyrells basically just absolutely destroy the Florence. They take the Florence seat and give it to their second son, Garland.
Yeah, Sir Garland. Yeah.
There's been a long history there, right? The Florence used to be the primary house of the Reach, and then they were supplanted by the Tyrells, and so this is finishing off a process that's been going on for a few hundred years.
Yeah, sort of. So the Florence were much higher status than the Tyrells until the Field of Fire,
right?
When the King of the Reach died, and then that's when Aegon the Conqueror up-jumped the Tyrells to Lord Paramount of the Reach, basically. Yeah. And they basically leapt over the Florence. So, and we had discussed previously lots of times about how there might be concern on the Tyrell side that if Stannis won the throne, that the Florence would leapfrog the Tyrells back over again.
Right, because the Florence have sided with Renly and then Stannis, so they're 0 for 2 on this.
Right. Well, but, the Renly decision falls in line with what their Lord Paramounts did, what the Tyrells did. The Stannis decision, well, not so much, I guess.
But it is. I mean, it's kind of like it's a toss of a coin, because if Stannis were to make a comeback here somehow, then the Florence could basically assert the Tyrells' position in the Reach again, and I'm sure that would be what they'll say. Hey, we've stuck with you through thin and thinner.
Right.
So other little bits of news that come to the small council: a kraken was seen off the fingers. Sir Adam Marbrand has found some of the pieces of the High Septon's crown, which was lost during the riot in King's Landing, where the previous High Septon was killed.
Right. Yes. And Adam Marbrand is now the commander of the Gold Cloaks after Sir Jocelyn Lord Jocelyn Bywater died. But then Tywin asks about his nephew Tyrek. Yeah, and Tyrek also went missing during the riots, and that's not Kevan's son. It might, because he was talking about his nephew and Tywin's brother was sitting next to him. It might have seemed like Tyrek was Kevan's son, but it's actually the second youngest Lannister brother, Tyget, who died of a pox. It's his son.
Oh, yeah. And also news of a 3-headed dragon being born in Qarth. We know where that news is coming from. It's not quite accurate, but Jorah was concerned that Dany was showing the dragons to the sailors and that news might reach the Iron Throne. But courtesy of the telephone game nature of that
Right.
news, the Iron Throne is going to ignore it completely. So no reason to worry.
Especially when it's coupled with a kraken being seen off the fingers, and
Right.
sinking in Ebony's ship.
So the Goldcloak deserters, I mean, I don't want to dwell on this. I mean, they debate how to handle it. Varys and Tyrion think they should go to the Night's Watch. Tywin wants to break all their knees, or Cersei wants to kill them all. So they decide to break their knees instead of sending them to Night's Watch. Some of this is just spite towards the Starks and the North generally to not populate the Night's Watch. They feel like the Night's Watch is a adjunct of the Northern Army, which of course it isn't. It really isn't. And it's just, knowing we just came from a Sam chapter where we saw the existential threat that the North poses and why there is a 700-foot wall and a Night's Watch. And it just seems incredibly short-sighted to not send these people that you have betrayed you to go and defend the realm from. It's not like they're going to be fighting you anytime soon. They're the Night's Watch. Right.
And I think this is a cause of what happens when you don't have any northern representation on your small council. These are all Reach Lords and Wester Lords, and none of them care one iota about what goes on at the wall.
They're willing to give it away, even though it's half the kingdom.
Yes, right. And just the short-sightedness. I mean, break a few of the Tyrion's argument is break a few of their kneecaps and send the rest to the Night's Watch. Make an example of a few. He suggests the ones that killed Sir Jacelyn Bywater, and send the rest to the Watch because they're needed. Because the only person, or at least that we're aware of this group that has been to Castle Black and walked the top of the wall is Tyrion, and he remembers Jeor Mormont's plea. We need people. Things are getting scary and dangerous up here.
But for Tyrion, it's been a constant source of embarrassment ever since. He's tried to help, and at every turn he's been laughed at.
Right. So the meeting ends, and I noticed that Varys was the first to leave, and I wondered again if that was to go spy on what the second half of this meeting was going to entail. I don't know how much spying he does himself and how much spying are his little birds, but just like the time when Cersei and Tyrion met for the first time in the small council chamber way back in the beginning of A Clash of Kings, I believe Varys was the first to leave then as well. And so I wonder if he quickly hustles out, gets to some spying location, and listens in on what's said while he's not in there. So that's just something I noticed.
The first thing he would have heard is the bomb drop that Cersei's going to remarry. But to an as yet undisclosed husband.
Tyrion. The first option mentioned is Balon Greyjoy.
Well, and Tyrion thanks the god he does not believe in.
He says, "Just when I was about to give up praying, some sweet god gives me this." The vision of his sister being packed off to Pike is I believe the description is like he can't quite suppress the smile that is threatening to spread across his face.
But others are considered as well, because again, Tywin's still, and I believe genuinely, not sure if he wants this alliance with Balon Greyjoy. And Balon is married, but his wife is old and believed on the way out, or at least would be if attractive Cersei was dangled in front of him.
And Tywin compares Balon Greyjoy and his wife to the other, great lords and their much younger wives.
Right.
And why he's a better option to consider because his wife is much older than the other wives are.
Yeah. Others that are considered are Oberyn Martell and Quentyn Martell. The Tyrells would not like that. But
no,
again,
Oberyn especially.
Yeah. Yes. The thing is, you as the royal family of the Seven Kingdoms, you have to make alliances with the Seven Kingdoms. I mean, there are 7 of them. You can't all be in one basket with the Tyrells.
Which does seem to be... Yeah, they're already marrying Joff to Marjorie. So, they're double dipping here with marrying Cersei to then, Marjorie's older brother. So, the Redwyne twins also get a mention, and Theon Greyjoy is the other mention. Just to give you some age ideas of what we're dealing with here. Oberyn Martell's in his early 40s. Quentin's about 17. The Redwyne twins are late teens, early 20s, and we know Theon is somewhere around 21-ish, I believe we worked it out. So Cersei is early 30s. I think she's like maybe 33, 34, something like that.
But the choice seems to be Willas Tyrell, who's in the 23 to 26 range. It does make some sense to double down. That the Tyrells and the Lannisters would have two marriages. They're the two richest houses. But again, there is that spreading it around thing that's being missed out on. Maybe the concern is that with a Joffrey and Marjorie marriage, that gives the Tyrells power in King's Landing. And so it would be a counter move to get Cersei to become the Lady of Highgarden, where she can exert some Lannister influence on House Tyrell from within. So it's sort of like a counterbalance to that. But Tyrion is worried that Willas will contract a fatal sword through the gut when Jaime finds out that he's
that is he thought, that Jaime was much younger last time that Cersei was married off, and he wonders whether Jaime will be as understanding and patient this time around. But there's Tywin describes Willas Tyrell as mild and courtly and fond of reading books and looking at stars and breeding animals, and I thought, that does sound like the perfect match for Sansa. Maybe he really would play with puppies and sail down the Mander on a pleasure barge with her, But it's very unlike George Martin to give anyone their perfect match. So I think Ned and Cat were about as close as we've seen, and obviously he quickly tore that apart as soon as the story opened. But then speaking of not perfect matches, the Sansa Tyrion proposal, Tyrion thinks Sansa Stark, who loves silks, songs, chivalry, and tall, gallant, handsome knights, he thinks, oh goodness, she's gonna get me. And he's already got a terrible self-esteem about him, feelings about himself, so it's not surprising that he thinks, what a terrible, cruel thing to do to Sansa Stark, give her to me. And his father thinks, why, are you going to be cruel to her? But really, no, he just thinks he's not worthy of her.
Yeah.
But one thing about the Sansa and Willas news that I feel like we need to at least mention, the marriage proposal news, is I think we should at least consider how Littlefinger got to know this information to tell the Lannisters about it. So we know that Sansa told Sir Dantas, and that concerned us, that he might blab accidentally or on purpose to keep his plan as the only option for her to consider. It's possible that others might have known, because we know that he told Sansa previously that they couldn't leave right then before the battle when she wanted to leave, because his friend was out of the city. Now, we can coincidentally, Littlefinger was in Bitterbridge at the time.
Or not coincidentally.
Yes, right. So it certainly gives some credence to Littlefinger being that friend.
Right, and then you've definitely got a progression of information here, from Sansa to Dantas to Littlefinger to Tywin.
Yes. So that is the most logical path that this information would have taken. However, Tyrion says something just offhand in this chapter that brings up another possibility. He points out that it was Littlefinger, not the Master of Whisperers, Lord Varys, who provided this information. So that makes you wonder, did Varys not know and got scooped by Littlefinger? Or did Varys know and hadn't reported it because he only gives out information when he sees fit?
Right.
In that instance, this backfired on him. So if he knew, was he waiting for the right time to release and got scooped by Littlefinger? Or was he wanting to see Sansa get safely out of King's Landing?
Yeah.
Or maybe as a third, maybe neither of these two.
Yeah.
Maybe Dantas didn't tell Littlefinger and Varys didn't know about it. Somehow Littlefinger just figured it out. But it's certainly worth thinking about. How did Littlefinger find out that information, and did Varys know?
It does worry me, because I think we even hypothesized at the time that Sansa told him that Sir Dantas might not be the right person to tell. And now you've put this together for me. I'm like, oh, I think that's what's happened. I think Sir Dantas has told Littlefinger. Because not because he wants to hurt Sansa, but he feels that that's a possible disruption to the plan he's got to get her out of here,
Right. Yeah. So,
but then if that's true, if Littlefinger genuinely wants to get Sansa out of here and is helping Sir Dantas in that plan, which of course could be completely untrue, Sir Dantas could be a completely ignorant patsy here. But if it is true, then has this backfired? Because if they're now going to speed up a marriage between Tyrion and Sansa, is that actually going to prevent the plan? Or if nothing else, is it going to make her, if the plan comes to fruition after the marriage, is she lumbered with Tyrion?
just to put to have Tyrion pack a suitcase too.
Right. So I mean, we don't have to spend too long, I think, on Sansa and Tyrion. I mean, Tyrion's concerned for Sansa. He feels like she's been through enough, and marrying him is not exactly the reward she was looking for. And he's quite sympathetic towards her. But I think at the same time, he's like, I am actually a nice guy.
Right.
It wouldn't be the end of the world for her.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the biggest issue, which seems not to be an issue at all in Westeros, is the fact that she is a 13-year-old child, and he's in his mid to late 20s. But I mean, that seems to not be a problem in Westeros, I guess. So if we're overlooking that incredibly inappropriate element, then I think he, despite his frequent visitations to brothels, I think he really deep down is a loyal man. He's been very loyal to Shae since they've been an item. He loves Shae. He wants to be with Shae. I think he possibly could feel the same way about a wife. And in fact, he thinks that a wife might be the very thing he needs. A castle or a keep of his own away from his family, where he can be his own person and not always in the shadow of his family members.
Yeah. But overall, the plan is solid. I mean, if Sansa were to have a son, that child would be welcome as Lord of the North, if the North ever comes back and gets out from under Greyjoy control. So it's definitely possible. But the last part of the chapter is about Robb's wedding. And of course, this is news to Tyrion. He's absolutely stunned by this news. But what's very interesting here, which we didn't see coming, is that this all feels like a plan. That the Westerlings, a minor house of the Lannisters, have actually conspired with Tywin Lannister to seduce Robb Stark. Yeah. Knowing that Robb Stark is Ned Stark's son, he then marries her, betraying his alliances with the Freys and possibly fatally undermining his cause entirely.
Yeah, and we had slightly discussed that in the Cat chapter when Cat found out.
But I didn't believe it.
But it just seemed implausible.
Exactly.
Right, it seemed implausible at the time.
Just too much.
But he certainly gives that idea some credence here. Especially
unless he's just being kind of quick on his feet. Unless he's saying, this has happened and I'm going to thank the Westerlings for this. But that doesn't sound like Tywin.
No, it certainly doesn't. And, the very end of the chapter is quite fascinating because Tyrion says, can the Westerlings be such fools to think the direwolf could defeat the lion? And Tywin gives what Tyrion puts an almost smile, which Tyrion says is terrifying to behold, and says, the greatest fools are oft times more clever than the men who laugh at them.
Yeah, and it also goes to the fact that Greywind, is that Robb's direwolf?
Yeah.
Did not like the Westerlings, right?
Right. Yeah.
that he senses that they're actually not on his side. Huh.
Yeah. So it's something we'll have to watch. It's a very cool wrinkle.
The funny thing is that when Tyrion asked the question, can the Westlings be such fools to think that the direwolf can defeat the lion? Well, the answer to that question is not if the Westerlings marry Robb Stark.
Right.
Without that, there was quite a good chance, but with it...
Nope.
Do you have some background for us, Mackelly?
I do. Now, of course, the logical subject for background here would be the Rain Tarbeck Revolution. However, I didn't think we'd have enough time to cover it properly in this episode because I knew how much we had to cover in the general discussion part. But no worries, there will be opportunities in later chapters to talk about that. I also wanted to cover the Battle of Ashford. However, that's mostly covered throughout the story. We'll get bits and pieces of information from that, so I will leave that alone as well. Instead, I'm going to focus on the path that Tyrion mentions the Dornish contingent will take from Sunspear to King's Landing. So, Mace Tyrell was irked about the prospect of Dorne Martell and company marching through his lands on their way to King's Landing. Tyrion thinks it's unlikely they would do so. Instead, he figures they'll climb the Bone Way, turn east near Summerhall, and come up the King's Road. So, the Bone Way, or the Stone Way, as it's more formally called, is a path that runs through the Red Mountains and connects Dorne and the Stormlands. The Bone Way is stony with steep, narrow slopes and twisting passages. There are actually steps carved in the rock of the mountain at its steepest parts. The Dornish side of the Bone Way is guarded by the Castle Ironwood with a Y?
Ironwood. I say
Ironwood with a Y, yeah, okay. It looks like Ironwood, but instead of a Y, an I, there's a Y. So anyway, it's guarded by the Castle Ironwood, which is the seat of House Ironwood. The head of the house holds the title of Warden of the Stoneway. The path runs north past the River Wyle and ends up at Summerhall in the Dornish Marches. On the northern side, the pass ends at the ruin of Summerhall in the Dornish Marches, like I just said. Of course, that castle is best known for the tragic fire that took the life of King Aegon V and the two closest Duncans to him, Duncan the Tall, the Lord Commander of the Royal Kingsguard, and Duncan the Small, Aegon's son and heir.
Alright, comparison with the television show. Tywin's first small council meeting only has the familiar crew, Cersei, Tyrion, Littlefinger, Varys, and Grand Maester Pycelle. The conversation is much abbreviated from this chapter, but as I mentioned, news of Jaime's escape has reached them, but nothing more than that. Tywin is mad at his spies for not having any information on this.
Okay.
Bolton holds Harrenhal is a piece of news that they share. Robb and company are returning to Riverrun, but no mention yet of the marriage. But that's because this whole Westerling plot is dropped from the TV show. He marries a girl who of no station whatsoever in the TV show. And clearly is not part of a plot, so that story is dropped from the TV show. Littlefinger is off to the Vale to woo Lysa, and his being Lord of Harrenhal gives him a chance. Tyrion is going to become Master of Coin. There's no mention at this time of Tyrion or Cersei marriages, but eventually the Tyrion-Sansa idea is certainly part of the show. I just couldn't find that sort of, it wasn't in this meeting that this was mentioned. I don't remember if Cersei is told to marry someone else, but I'll keep an eye on that.
All right.
Pedantry Corner. The timing of the dress. The dressmaker was adamant that she was sent by Cersei Lannister, but Cersei seems ignorant of the plan to marry Tyrion to Sansa.
Right.
So it just seems a little bit... I mean, we've talked about it. Some of it is just timing. She did storm out of the small council meeting before Tyrion got his news, so maybe she was trying to avoid seeing his happy reaction to getting the news he was marrying Sansa.
That's a good point. It's possible that Cersei knew that bit and just didn't know the reason for it.
Right.
I guess it's possible that she knew Tywin had plans on marrying Tyrion to Cersei, but did not know that the Tyrells, to Sansa, but she did not know the Tyrells had planned on marrying Sansa to Willas.
Right. So maybe there's no pedantry here, but it is the whole thing's just a little bit confusing. Anyway,
Yes,
that's
I'm
all I
with
have.
you.
News and notes.
News and notes. So on November 3rd, which is the week that this episode actually comes out, George Martin will be meeting with Kevin Smith at Kevin's new theater in Highlands, New Jersey. It's called Smod Castle Cinema, for an interview / just general discussion. They're going to talk about comic books and movies and TV and writing success and failures and much more. Tickets are $30 or $75 for a VIP ticket, which gets you reserved seating and a signed copy of Rise of the Dragon. You can buy the tickets at smodcastle.com.
By the time this airs, we'll have had a live Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer call. I'm sure we had a great time.
I'm sure we always do.
Yeah.
It's you can bank on it that it's going to be fun.
We got a review from on podchaser.com from P.Pixotomari 89. This is actually the only A Song of Ice and Fire podcast I was able to listen to for more than 2 episodes. So we're not good, but we're better than the rest. I'm actually on chapter 30-something of book 2, and one of these days my husband was laughing and I asked what happened, and he had just thought of something that in his point of view would make it to Pedantry Corner. Reach out, let us know.
Right.
we missed some pedantry. I'm disappointed. And he's not even listening to all the episodes, but that's how captivating the discussions between these two are. 10 out of 10. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. I thought that was a really fun way to do a review right there. That was cool.
So conclusion. So the whole small council meeting might be just for show. I mean, like the only thing that the new lords who are part of the small council, Redwyne, Tyrell, and bail me out, man.
Rowan. Mathis Rowan.
Rowan, yes. was on the carving up the spoils of war. Otherwise, it was Tywin and Kevan basically presenting evidence and decrees and decisions to the rest of them.
Yeah, and this is our first time meeting Mace Tyrell, and we can see why his mom called him Lord Pufferfish or Puffish or whatever she said. He constantly said things like,
as a lord, one of your goals is to acquire more, right?
Right, sure.
And he's just taken everything that House Florent owns. So
right. And he was also known to multiple times in this chapter say, "That's what I would do," as do this because that's what I would do. But once again, we see that Sansa's inability to keep news to herself likely cost her here.
Yes, it does feel like she told Dantas, and Dantas told Littlefinger, and Littlefinger told the small council of Tywin, Cersei Lannister. She's not who she wanted to tell this to. And as a result, she's going to end up not married to the heir to Highgarden, but instead the heir to absolutely nothing at all, Tyrion Lannister. So.
Which has been confirmed by his father in no uncertain terms.
Exactly.
You could certainly understand her telling Dantos. I mean, he's been a friend to her, basically her only confidant in the Red Keep. He's seemingly made big plans for her escape that are no longer needed, so she possibly felt the need to inform him, "Oh, everything you've just done for me, guess what? I'm not going to need that after all. I've got a different route I'm going to go here." But, maybe the third time will be the charm, and the next time something comes up, she'll just not say anything.
Yeah, and so timing is everything. So when these marriages are scheduled, it does seem that with this knowledge, the Lannisters are going to make sure that she's married before she can ever get out of town. So, but Littlefinger has this. We're speculating that Littlefinger has this plan to rescue her, and so maybe there is a third horse in this race. There's two marriages, but there's also this escape plan, and so which one of these comes first, we shall see. At
the very least, we know Dantas has a plan, but his plan is the wedding day, so maybe...
Oh, that's right, it's for the wedding day, and and the worrying thing there is, you could imagine the Lannisters waiting till then for the Tyrion Sansa wedding, but the dressmaker said that her dress would be ready long before, plenty of time for the royal wedding. So
right.
that makes you think it's going to be before.
Yeah, and Tywin said that Mace is not going to mention the Sansa Willas betrothal idea before the royal wedding. We'll wait till after. So as long as they marry Sansa to Tyrion before the royal wedding.
And presumably the Tyrells aren't planning to leave town until after the royal wedding, and so Sansa's stuck there through that time. Yeah.
Right.
Jaime, of course, is on his way back, and if he gets back, he might want to stop this Cersei Willas wedding.
Right.
I'm sure he would.
We have not seen Jaime interact with his father. We don't know if Jaime has any kind of special connection with his father, being, his firstborn son that he had hoped to groom as heir, or if there's contention there because he joined the Royal Kingsguard instead of being his heir. We don't know. We don't know what kind of relationship they have. Whether Jaime might have the power to convince his father to not marry Cersei off to at least Willas Tyrell, push it down the road a bit.
Yeah, and of course I don't think he might object to the fact that she gets married. It's just not being in King's Landing would be the issue for him. But perhaps he could have Joffrey release him from his vows and then join her in King's Landing, in Highgarden.
Yeah, or send him to protect her.
As Queen Regent. Yeah, yeah.
But, I actually was thinking about part of their reasoning for marrying Cersei, Tywin and Kevan, is that a marriage reduces the incest claim that Stannis is making.
Right.
But I think the bigger reduction is keeping Jaime away from Cersei and Cersei getting pregnant.
Right. I think that's the problem with anything Jaime wants. Tywin wants them apart.
Right. Yes. The further apart they are, that hurts the claim more, especially if she gets pregnant.
Yeah. So actually, Jaime being in chains in Riverrun worked for him.
Yes, for Tywin's plans that worked perfectly.
So next week we're off to Riverrun to see what Kat's up to. In the meantime, you could help us out by leaving us a review. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. You could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal, or you could become a sustainer there at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level. Join us for our live discussions, get your episodes a day early and ad-free, and lots of other perks too.
That's right. And of course, you can always reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.